Good morning. Good morning. Welcome. Welcome. We're so excited for you to join us on this Tuesday morning. It is an absolutely gorgeous Tuesday here in New York State. We are so excited to share with you two different FFA student-led school maple programs as our virtual field trips this year. Our first virtual field trip is Stockbridge Valley. And Stockbridge Valley is in Munnsville, New York, which is the big star in the center of the state, right in central New York in Madison County. We're excited to share with you our host, Miss Erin Smith. Erin, good morning. How are you? And I think we're still trying to get some things worked out. So as we're getting things worked out, you can see that it's sunny outside, so it's above freezing, and we will probably see a lot of sap flow today. So Erin, do we have you yet? And if you can hear me, you are muted.
I'm in. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now. So good morning. Thank you so much for having us out. Can you just tell us who you are, where we're at, and a little bit about your program, the history of your program?
Absolutely. So my name is Erin Smith. I'm the agriculture teacher and FA advisor here at Stockbridge Valley Central School, which is located in Munnsville, New York, which is about 10 miles south of Oneida, to give you an idea, and about 10 miles also north of Morrisville. And here at Stockbridge Valley, we have been producing maple syrup here since 1976, when the agriculture educator at the time, Mr. Ray Lighthall, and some students decided that they wanted to start tapping maple trees around town and boiling in a small shed in town, up on Route 46. And since then, we have made maple syrup here. In 1998, we built a new school, and in that school project, they built a sugar house, which stands here behind me. And so the evaporator and the sugar house itself has been here since 1998. About 6 or 7 years ago, we had a capital project which renovated the inside of the sugar house. We're really fortunate to have such a great facility, and I'm excited to take some time and show you around and have some of my students join me in our maple process. And we make about 100 to 150 gallons of syrup a year, and this year has been an outstanding year for syrup so far. I think we're at about 160 gallons that we've made this year on 500 taps up in the woods.
That's incredible. So as we're getting going, if you have questions you would like to ask Erin and her crew, because we're going to get to talk to some of her students who run the Maple program, please put it in the Q&A. We will try to answer as many of the questions as we can throughout the virtual field trip. But there's always a lot of questions, so we're excited to get going. So how do we start? I mean, what is a maple tree? Where do we start? Where do we go?
Well, excellent. I'm going to have Nick come on in and join us. We're just figuring out our technical difficulties here.
And if you'd like to, you can just pass over your headset and
I might do that. Nick, why don't I just give you my headset and then you can join us down here.
Okay.
So Nick,
my name is Nick, and I'm a junior here at Stockbridge Valley, and I'm part of the FFA Ag Production Program here and help run the.
So as we're going down to this tree, what are we looking for? We know we're trying to tap maple syrup. What kind of tree is in front of you?
So right here we have a maple tree. One of the ways we can tell is because it has opposite opposing buds. See, the buds are opposite of each other on each twig, and the bark is this specific pattern on it. So that's one of the few ways we can tell, at least when there's no leaves.
And then I'm looking behind you. I'm not seeing a lot of snow. Is there a time that we need to tap these trees?
During the late winter, like very early spring, during like February, March, it's when that during the time when it freezes at night and thaws during the day. So that helps draw the sap up from the roots and so we can collect it as it goes up.
So first we need to identify our maple tree. Now, is it only sugar maple trees we need to tap, or are there other kinds of maples we can tap?
You can tap other types of maples. There's the silver maple, the red maple. There's a lot of maples out in the maple family, but you're not limited to sugar maples. We just choose sugar maples because they produce a sap that has a slightly higher sugar content than other maples.
And why might we want more sugar content?
So it takes less sap to make 1 gallon of syrup. The higher the sugar content, the less it takes. So there's less boiling time involved.
And maple syrup process is not just a family tradition, but it's also business, correct? So we want to try to make it as efficient as possible. So we found our tree. Walk us through the steps, if you could, on how we tap a maple tree. What are things that we need to think about, things we need to look for when tapping a tree?
All right, so when we're tapping a tree, we first need to choose a tool. So we have 3 different types of drills here. We have the old-fashioned hand crank, which is heritage, and then we've got the electric drill, and then we got a gas-powered drill. We prefer the electric drill because it's a lot easier to lug around than a heavy gas one, and it just lasts longer. So when we tap a tree, we try to find the spot without an old tap hole, because right here you can see an old one. So we try to go about a couple inches to the side and a few inches up so that we don't hit any dead sapwood. So we get the drill and we get it slight downhill,
And
start it.
before you tap that tree, I want to ask a question of all our classrooms out there. It's sunny outside with a little snow. Do you think we're going to see sap come out, or you think there's going to be no sap and it's going to be frozen up? So go ahead and show us what's in the tree, Nate.
All right. So we drill a hole about 2 inches deep. Oops. And there is sap flowing.
So now we see sap flowing. What do we do next? How do we collect that?
The next step is to take a tap or a spile and hammer it into the tree.
Now, is there anything you need to do to be careful when putting in these spiles?
Not to drive them in too deep. If you drive them in too deep, you won't be able to remove it and you'll run the risk of cracking the wood.
Wow, we see that sap is pouring out.
Yeah.
Now, have you ever tasted sap? What might it taste like?
It tastes like water, but with a little sugar mixed in. Okay, I gotta make sure.
And where does the sugar come from?
From photosynthesis in the previous year. During the previous summer, the tree stores sugar in the roots for the next spring, so it can produce leaves when there's no photosynthesis to be done. So it just stored sugar and food.
So that's kind of neat to think about. That energy that is now dripping from the tree traveled across space, hit the leaves of that tree last year, and is now dripping onto the ground. What do we do next?
Well, the next thing we do is we grab a bucket or pail and we hang it on the spile. Nope. Not the best angle. It does? That's sort of the... Ah, there we go.
Wow, that's a lot of sap. Do you know about how long it would take to fill a whole bucket like that?
About a day-ish.
Wow, that's incredible. So I have some questions if you are willing to answer some. I do have a question. What's the green stuff on the bark?
The green stuff, that's just moss and lichen that's grown.
And is that natural or is that anything you need to be concerned about?
That's just natural.
And then I have Lisa wants to know, does the syrup flavor change depending on the type of maple tree?
It changed on the type of maple tree.
I would say it probably changes more on the type of species. So you can make maples, but you can make syrup from just about any variety of tree that has sap in it. So right now, there's a lot of people that are doing birch syrup and other species. That does change the flavor. The flavor of the maple syrup doesn't change a lot with the variety. It just changes on how much syrup we can get on the amount of sap, like Nick explained earlier.
Awesome. So when the sap comes out of the tree, does that affect like what you're doing now to the tree? Does that hurt the tree in any way?
It hurts it, but very slightly. It doesn't do much damage. When you put like 20 taps in a tree, that will hurt it. It's just doing it economically so you don't hurt the tree too much.
And from Miss Bloom's class 30Q 227, they want to know what's the average age of a tree to tap.
About 30 years. Has to be about what, 12 inches in diameter.
That's what, yeah, that.
And Miss Bloom's class again wants to know, do you have to disinfect the sap? And I think that takes us to our next part of the tour. What do you do with the sap once it comes from the tree and you've collected it?
Well, once we collect the sap, we put it in a large storage tank so that we can collect enough of it to boil.
As we walk up to our storage area, I'd like Ms. Hale to take a view. All of our trees are actually on a line system, which allows us to connect our trees all together. And our sap actually runs down the hill, all in those blue lines that you're going to see off in the distance. And we actually use a tap like this with the tubing that comes down and runs into our big tubes, so that all of our sap, instead of having to go to each tree and take the bucket off and dump it into another bucket and carry it into the barn, we're able to have it all run down to the barn on itself. So we're going to walk up.
So it's like a sap highway, huh?
Yeah, it's a lot less labor intensive for us. You don't have to go to each of our 500 taps every day that the sap runs to collect.
And I had a great question about that. ASM kindergarten wants to know, how do you manage that many taps? So we're going into the sugar house. And do we have you, Miss Smith?
Let's see. Am I here?
I hear you.
There we go.
So I had
Sorry,
ASM kindergarten wants to know, how do you manage 500 taps?
So my classes in the fall go through and spend time up in the woods, making sure that there's no holes from squirrels or downlines from trees.
It's her.
Can you mute, Nick?
It's your headset. It's not mine. It's yours. I don't know.
I'm sorry. Here, I'm gonna change.
And so what we see behind us is storage tanks. So we have the hoses coming. You can
Sorry
see
about that, guys. I gotta love technology. I'm sure all the teachers can.
it's quite all right. We see hoses coming out, and those are that sap highway that Mrs. Smith just shared with us, running from all the trees out in the sugar bush, the 500 taps, and they're coming into the storage area. And can you tell us what's going on, Mrs. Smith? And we see the sap flowing in. We've lost Miss Smith again. But we see the sap flowing in from the trees. So as we saw the trees, the sap was coming out when they was just tapped. So all that sap coming from the trees in the sugar bush. And do we have you back? We don't have Mrs. Smith back. So this was probably emptied the last night, and they are probably in the process of boiling the sap today. So let's see what questions we have. So we have one question from Mrs. Robinson's 3rd grade. How many gallons of sap are needed for 1 gallon of syrup? So the ratio of sap to syrup, it takes 40 gallons of sap to make 1 gallon of syrup. So think of that milk jug that you had this morning when you were pouring milk into your cereal. So you need 40 of those to make 1 milk jug of syrup. And Miss Smith, I think we have you back.
Am I back now?
Yeah, we have you back. So tell us what's going on. What are we seeing in front of us?
So what you're seeing is that we have a vacuum system that brings the sap through our lines. It kind of sucks it down the line. And what it does is it collects and then it dumps into our holding tank, which is 1,000 gallons. This morning, we probably had about 800 or 900 gallons of sap in our holding tank. Yep. And so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take a minute and hand my headset over to Tristan, who's going to take some time and explain the next process that we go through.
Good morning, Tristan. How are you? Tell us who you are and what grade you're in.
So I'm a senior this year. I'm in, let's say, E class, and I'm also an FFA member. So yeah, we have the holding tank you just saw, and then all that is pulled up after the vacuum system, up these tubes up here into the smaller tank up here, and that prepares the sap to be filtered into the sap house. So if we want to go outside, we can. So the next step.
So we're looking at an FFA building with lots of stuff going on. So we have the sap and we're following Tristan out the back door. We've been storing our sap and now we're going to see what happens with all that sap.
Can you use that phone?
So I'm hearing Miss Smith. Can you hear me? All right, and we don't have any audio on Tristan.
And they're still connected.
I can hear somebody speaking. There we go.
All right, can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. So we saw you bring all the sap in. Where does it go after that? That's a lot of sap.
So,
How many gallons of sap
it
is
is.
that?
that tank can hold about 1,000 gallons. I think we bring in what? How many gallons do we bring in per drawing?
1,000 gallons.
Yeah, it's about 1,000 gallons. Too. Sap.
What?
The sap.
Sap. Evaporator is running. It pumps sap, it's flowing, and it will actually work the bottom of our evaporation. So hot. So once we have no more sap, that upper tank will shut it down and no more sap is flowing.
Yep. So while it's flowing, it comes from that tube up there. That's connected to that top tank. So and then you see it slopes down. It's gravity fed through into that side of the building, right next to that blower, and it gets pulled right into the evaporator.
So I heard you mention gravity. Are you using things you learned in the classroom here at the SAP house?
Absolutely. I mean, pretty much anything at most of our classes in school, we can take here, math, figuring out the sugar content and how much you're going to need to boil on a certain day, given the humidity and the temperature. Gravity, you got physics, you got different chemistry in there with the sugars and all that. So there's a lot that gets incorporated into the sugar making, the syrup making process here that we have here.
So we had the sap come in, and one of the questions we had early on was, how do you disinfect it? And I guess the next process is how you disinfect it. So how do I take that sap and turn it to syrup?
So actually, so here's the evaporator, and on the other side is kind of that process. But this is a big evaporator here, and if you want to follow me.
And what is an evaporator?
Go ahead. So the evaporator is essentially a big metal pan over a fire. It's really a glorified pot. So we have natural gas in here, heating the bottom of this, and then we have the sap that flows through this pan. Here, this is a 4x10 pan, the first pan, and then we have a finishing pan up front, and that is a 4x4 pan, is where the syrup is finished off. Up top in the hood is a warming hood. So when syrup flows in, it warms it up to temperature. So when it goes in, it's going to stop the boil. It just keeps going. So if you follow me to the other side, I can show you more of that. So here in this line is where the cold sap comes in. You can see it's all the steam is all condensating on the thing. It's cold to the touch. And that goes through there, and it goes all the way through this hood and comes back through here, preheated. So this here is warm. It's actually kind of hot. Don't touch that. It comes through here, and then it sits here and gets ready to pull in. And it's on a float system, so that when the levels drop inside the pan, because there's a draw of syrup or whatever, it'll open up the valve and let that much amount of sap in, so we have a constant level and kind of a constant flow rate. So it's all, synced up. Any questions about this specific area of it? Oh. No? All right. So this is defoamer. This helps keep it keeps the foam down and make it a lot nicer and easier for it to boil. It's all food safe. It's just a small additive. We add like a drop in there, and that's all you need. We do that every about 10 minutes or so. It helps keep the foam levels down, and it works great. This is one of the small applicator rods. We get it in big jugs. Yeah, that helps. It just helps the system run smoothly. If you want to, did you show them in here?
Why'd you add the defoamer to the sap? Why did it foam up?
We add it in the back here because if you add it in the front, it's already foamed up back here. There's not really much access to this big panel here. And if you put it in the sap first, it just circulates it through the whole thing and keeps it down on the inside where it's harder to get to. Once you get up to the front, the defoamer is already kind of in it, and it helps keep it down that way. Also, back here, it continuously adds new sap. So you also need to continuously add a little bit more defoamer so that the balance stays kind of the same.
And Miss Trivial Class wants to know, do you need an evaporator? Do you need this big, beautiful, shiny piece of equipment, or can you use things that you have at home, like pots and pans?
Oh no, this is a large operation. We can do probably 4 or 5 times more than what we do with this system. At home, you can get one bucket, tap one tree, and you can bring it on and boil on a pot in your house and do it that way. I've done it in my house like that before. Like we had a small pan. It was probably about this big, and it was sitting over a wood fire, and we would boil like that and make some for our own, drink a couple gallons a year. But you can definitely do it. You can even do it on your stove. Like It's just a matter of getting the sap and boiling it.
Miss Fisher's class wants to know, how long does it take to turn the sap into syrup? Is there more of a process? We just see a small pan on the back. Can you walk us through what this evaporator does?
Yeah, so the length of time kind of differs. It's more about the temperature and the sugar content it has to get to. So if you have a good boil going, how long would you think it takes? 200? Yeah, so through this thing, we do about 200 gallons an hour. Which is a lot. It draws, and when we get up to a good boil, it can draw every 5 to 10 minutes into this bucket here. It pulls syrup off of this pan automatically. It's all an automated system, and pours it into that pan there. Once it hits a certain temperature that has been calculated for the day based on the humidity of the air and what the sugar content of the sap is. Once it hits that temperature in this pan, it pulls it off because you know it's done, or very, very close to done. So
we're seeing a lot of steam in front of us. What can you tell us what's going on?
So this steam, you can actively see here the water getting pulled from what's like the finishing pans of the syrup. So the whole idea behind it is you want to pull as much water as you want out because you want to condense that sugar concentration. And that's what makes it sticky and like that brown color is that you're pulling the water out of it. And you can see the water escaping here, getting captured in the hood, and then getting recycled to warm the new sap.
Miss Robinson's third grade wants to know, what temperature does the sap need to be boiled to be considered syrup?
Like I said, it depends on the day, but it's about 7 degrees above the boiling point of water. And so on average, that's about 219 degrees Fahrenheit. But depending on where your elevation and how humid it is out, that can change. Right now, we have it set to 214.1. Yeah, that's calibrated to this thermometer right here. Right where we are now. So, and then that can change day to day.
And I have a great question from Jeremy in Mrs. Lewis class. And he wants to know, do you make other flavored syrup other than maple syrup, or can you only make maple syrup? And as I'm asking that, what's going on? You have a leak. Tell us what's happening.
Yes. So this isn't a leak. This is a draw. So we hit that temperature where it said the syrup is done, and the system automatically opens the valve with this box here and is letting out that syrup that is finished cooking. So we will take this and then go bottle it or make maple candy with it. But this is finished syrup right here.
Are you ever tempted to put a stack of pancakes under it?
Every day. So it is coming out at 214 degrees. So I wouldn't advise eating it immediately. But to the other question about other types of maple syrup, other types of syrup, like Nick kind of said earlier, you can make different kinds of syrup. I personally know a guy that is working on making birch syrup, but technically you could run any type of sap through this. You just have to calibrate it for whatever sap you're using. We just happen to use maple syrup, and that's the only one we do, because it is both an agriculture education piece and also the business piece.
And I had a great question. They want to know, why was it so liquidy? Will it start to thicken up as it cools down?
Yes. So as most things, especially and syrup as well, as they get hot, they get a lot less sticky. It's just how it is when it gets hot. Once it cools down, you'll get that thicker, sticky, kind of gooey maple syrup that we all know.
And that was from Miss McNally's 4th and 5th grade classes. So now we're in another part of the sugar house. Where are we? And what are we doing?
So for that question, I am going to pass you off to Madison here, and she can tell you about the rest of it.
Hi, Madison. How are you? Tell us who you are, what grade you're in.
So my name is Madison Malley, and I am currently a junior. I'm in three Miss McCaffrey's ag classes, and the main ag class that makes our maple syrup is her ag production class. So we are in our bottling facility, also known as our kitchen. It's connected to our evaporator room. And as you saw, Tristan and Miss McCaffrey, our Miss Smith, just put the syrup into here. So you may see that there's some little floaties. Don't fret though, we have a process to get that out. So if we go right behind Sarah here, we have this food grade filtering agent called diatomaceous earth. We put it in the syrup. You want me to actually put it in there? Okay. So we'll put about 2 scoops in here. And then we'll grab a whisk. And then we'll whisk it to get all of the clumps out of here. The machine that the syrup, the sap right now, is not sap, syrup, I was right the first time. The short in is how we bottle our maple syrup. If you see right here, there's a little spout. If you open it up, the syrup will come out of here, and normally there's a bottle under here, but we're actually going to filter this syrup through our filtering machine.
So when you added that, does that change the flavor of the syrup anyway?
If you were to just drink the syrup right now, it would, but when we send it through our filtering machine, all of the diatomaceous earth that we put into the syrup will be taken out.
And what is that doing to the floaty bits that you identified?
So the diatomaceous earth acts as something that our filtering agent can stick onto, so it helps filter out all of this. It's just so that it can prime the machine so the floaty bits don't make it through our filtering machine.
Which gives you that clear syrup that you're looking for?
Yes, yes.
Wonderful. And we saw a little instrument right in front of the camera just a second ago. Can you tell us what that is? What are we looking at? What kind of scientific instrument?
So I'll take a minute and kind of explain this. This is a little bit a new one. So we have a hydrometer, which is a weighted piece of glass that floats in our syrup and tells us how dense it is. And since our syrup is we can tell this particular jar it says it should be at 64 Brix. Brix is kind of like Fahrenheit or degrees. It's a measurement that we measure how our sugar is in. And then my hydrometer floats, and I am right on the money, which means that my syrup is the perfect density so that when it is being stored, the sugar floats around with the water and stays separated. If I cook it not enough and with too much water, it would spoil. And if I cooked it too much, my sugar molecules will stick together and actually make more or less rock candy in the bottom of my sugar container that it's stored in. So I want to make sure that I have it at the correct density in order to properly store it so that when you pour it on your pancakes, it's perfect. All right, so we are going to go ahead and filter that Madison just talked about. It might get a little loud because of our air pump that turns on.
So we're taking the syrup from the pan and we're going to put it through a.
So you'll see that Mr. McCaffrey, or Miss Smith, I'm sorry, is putting a tube into the syrup. This tube will take it into our machine, and then we'll have another tube that comes out and it will come into our other pan that we have. Our other pan is a little bit smaller. We can also take the syrup right from the filtering machine and put it into our big jugs that we use for storage throughout the year. But we're going, like this. So this is actually full of syrup that we made this year. As you can see, there's 2 big caps that we put on, and this will last about 2-3 years. And the reason is because we bring it up to that correct temperature, which is 7 degrees above the boiling point of water. And we do that as well for the sap that we're putting into our regular bottles. So they're just trying to get it figured out. I can answer questions in the meantime if there's any while she's doing that. Oh, here we go. And then I don't know if you can hear me, but this is the pure syrup that I was talking about. We have these little pieces of paper within our filtering machine that acts kind of as a cheesecloth for our maple syrup. So it goes through all of these separate chambers, and then when it comes out here, it's clean and filtered syrup. And if you come over here, it's flowing right into them. Let's look it up. There we go. So after we filter maple syrup, we have two options. We have smaller jugs that we use that we store over here. Again, we can either put the tube directly into this tub, or we can fill it using that. Most of the time we do it with the tube because it takes less time, or we can put it into our maple syrup bottles after it's been stored in here. So one more process that we have to do before we bottle our syrup is grade our syrup. We have 4 different types of grade, as you can see on here. We have a golden color delicate, amber color rich taste, dark color robust taste, and very dark color strong taste. So many people may just think that we grade our syrup on the color, and that is true, but the lighter the color of the syrup is, the actual lighter the flavor of the maple syrup is. So the darker maple syrup that you have, the more prominent flavor of maple syrup. So these, we have 3 grades right here, and if you put them in the sun, you can kind of see the different types of colors. And then this is a syrup that we actually produce and we put in here. So we'll put it into our grading machine, and we'll hold it up to the light to see what grade it is. And as you can see, it's darker than this. That one? Okay. It's darker than this, but closer to this. So we would grade this a dark robust.
Now, when we're thinking of grades in school, when I get like a grade that's lower than a top grade, is that bad?
Grade 8 syrups. Could be syrup towards the end of the season that had a really strong flavor that you might want to use in cooking. It might not be as pleasant to eat on our pancakes. You certainly can, and I have a lot of customers that prefer the really dark commercial grade B syrup. But really, all of these are all grade A, so they're all good quality. They just have different flavor profiles.
And what is your favorite flavor profile?
I prefer the dark or the very dark, strong flavor. I like to take my maple in my pancakes.
I totally agree, Mrs. Smith. So we're running up with a minute left. I want to ask one more question that for all the teachers out there and students, if teachers want to get started at part of our schoolyard sugaring contest that we run every year, or just do this as part of their classroom, where do they get started? How do you start? We see a lot of equipment. We've seen a lot of hoses. It looks like a lot of expense. Is there any way to do this in my classroom?
Absolutely. It really is as simple as getting a spile or a tap of a bucket. It could even be a 5-gallon white bucket. It doesn't have to be a special sat bucket like we have. It can be like a milk jug even. And any way to collect that sap. And then all you need is a pot and a stove in order to boil it down. I can tell you it's gonna take you a long time on a small pot with a small stove, but it was very doable.
And what do your students think of being part of a maple program?
I still really enjoy it. I'm not much of a
About that. Yeah, I personally enjoyed a lot. I'm not such a fan of the whole evaporator part, but I like bottling and doing the maple filtering along with organizing our syrup cabinet. It is truly a great experience. And if you come over here, we actually have it's pretty full and we organize it by grade. So we'll start with our light and then go all the way to the dark. And then we have all of our different sizes, going from all the way to a sampler to a gallon.
Well, we want to thank you and the Stockbridge crew and Mrs. Smith so much for having us on your campus today. It has been a great joy to learn about your program and share your program. We are so excited. And if they want Stockbridge syrup, where can they find it?
Absolutely, we have syrup available all year round. We also ship it anywhere in the country, and we can send it overseas. It ships in the mail really well. So you can contact me at Stockbridge Valley. I'm sure that my information is webinar, and or just call the school office and they'll know how to get a hold of me and figure it out for you.
Well, we'll definitely share your contact with teachers in the follow-up email. Thank you to all of you. We hope you have a wonderful 2023 maple season. We know this is going to be a historic season. We always think positive here at New York Ag in the Classroom. So you all have a blast and enjoy your syrup season.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Bye, everybody.